The restaurant had that particular Thursday evening hum. Tables filling in at the edges before the center, the low percussion of cutlery and conversation, the kind of warmth that builds slowly from bodies and overhead lights and food arriving at the right temperature. The kind of sound that becomes invisible after enough shifts. Background music for everyone in the room except the people running it. Marcus Webb noticed all of it the way he noticed everything on the floor. Not consciously. The way a person notices weather after years of working outside. The data arriving before the thought. The adjustment made before the decision. He had been watching Table 14 since he came on shift at 5:30. A woman sat there alone. She had arrived precisely at 7, which matched the reservation name printed on the slip in his apron pocket. She had ordered sparkling water when the host seated her. Without opening the menu, he noticed. The menu sat in front of her, untouched. She wore a charcoal blazer over a cream shirt, and her posture had a particular quality he recognized but could not immediately name. It wasn't discomfort. It wasn't the performed arrangement of a person waiting to be noticed. It was something else. The settled stillness of someone completely inside themselves, who had made a separate peace with the fact that the room around her had not been organized for her ease, and had stopped requiring it to be. He had taken the reservation from Jalen 40 minutes before his shift. "There's a woman coming in at 7, Jalen had said, leaning against the host's stand with the easy posture of a man who has never once doubted the room belongs to him. Blind, like actually, cane and everything. He had said this with the waiting quality of someone presenting a punchline to an audience he'd already warmed up. "Thought you might want to handle Table 14 tonight. You know, since you're so good at—" A pause arranged for effect, a glance at the cluster of servers behind him, connecting with people. There had been laughter. Not everyone's. Darius had looked toward the kitchen window. Marcus had not changed his expression. He had taken the slip of paper, Voss, party of 1, 7 p.m., folded it, put it in his apron, and said, "I'll take 14. He had returned to the service station and set up his tray. Now at 7:14, he picked up the tray, crossed the floor, and stopped at the table. "Good evening," he said. "I'm Marcus. I'll be taking care of you tonight." Her eyes moved toward him. They didn't focus the way sighted eyes focus, but the orientation was precise. She had placed it by his voice and his footsteps, and her head had turned accordingly before he'd finished speaking. Her name, he knew, was Voss. He did not yet understand what that name meant to the world outside this restaurant. He knew only what he could observe, that she was somewhere in her late 30s, that her hands rested flat on the table with a considered quality, and that the menu in front of her had not been touched. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was measured, the kind of voice that had been asked to perform composure in a very large number of rooms, and had, eventually, stopped performing and simply become composed. "Can I go over the menu with you?" he asked. "Not can I help you with the menu. Not would you like me to read that for you since. Just a simple offer. A thing done between two people, neither of whom was staging anything." A brief pause. Something in her shoulders released, very slightly. "Please." He went through it. Not rushed, not over-careful. He described the dishes the way he'd want someone to describe them to him. The actual textures, the actual flavors, the things that distinguished one preparation from another. He mentioned that the salmon was better than the sea base tonight because the afternoon delivery had been exceptional and the chef had handled the salmon himself, which she would not know and he would only mention because it was true. He noted that the risotto was beautiful but ran about 10 minutes long on a busy Thursday, and this was a busy Thursday. She listened without filling the space with reassuring noise. She asked 2 questions, both specific, both about method rather than ingredients. She made a decision, told him clearly, and he wrote it down. Then she reached into the small bag beside her chair and produced a thin metal stylus and a narrow folding device he recognized immediately. A Braille slate, the manual kind, used for writing dots by hand. She placed them on the table. Then she stopped. "Sorry," she said, not embarrassed, just noting a situation plainly. "I was going to write something down. I don't have the paper I usually carry." He had already reached into his apron. He kept a small notepad there, unlined, the kind he ordered in bulk because he worked through them quickly. He set it on the table within her reach and said nothing further. She found it without searching for it. The way people who have built their own navigation systems find things, through touch, through spatial memory, through the quiet confidence of someone who has stopped waiting for the world to hand things to her directly. She placed the notepad flat. She positioned the slate over it with the ease of long practice. She began to write. He should have walked away. He had other tables. He had a service rhythm the whole floor depended on, and interrupting it for a single table was the kind of thing that compounded over a shift in ways that were difficult to recover from. He did not walk away. He watched her write. He had not watched anyone write Braille in 4 years. The motion of it, the precise downward pressure of the stylus working right to left so that it could be read left to right once the page was flipped, was something he had once learned in 40-minute intervals at a kitchen table on Delaney Street, while a woman with slowly darkening sight sat across from him and corrected his technique with the patience of someone who had accepted many inconveniences in her life, but not in precision. Elena finished a line. She lifted the slate. She held the notepad toward the space where she had placed it by sound. "Would you read it?" she asked. He took the notepad. He held it the way he remembered, the left hand anchoring the page, the right moving across the raised dots from left to right, letter by letter, contraction by contraction, the way you read any language you have spent enough time inside to have stopped translating. "I hope you don't mind my asking, is the risotto worth the wait?" He read it aloud, calmly, the way you read something you understand. The silence that followed was a different kind of silence from all the ones before it. It had a specific quality, the quality of someone recalibrating, of an unexpected thing arriving and requiring a moment to be absorbed. She did not move for 3 full seconds. Then she turned her face toward him, that precise orientation without visual focus, and it was the most directed attention she had offered anyone in this room since she arrived. "You read Braille," she said. "Yes. A beat." "Why?" He considered this. It was an honest question. It deserved an honest answer rather than a comfortable one. "My wife," he said. "She lost most of her sight before she passed. I learned so I could still leave her notes." The room continued its Thursday evening hum around them. Somewhere behind him, at the server station, he was aware of a cluster of voices. He did not turn toward them. Elena Voss said, very quietly, "That is the most extraordinary thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. If this story is already pulling at something in you, hit the like button and subscribe to Quiet Kind, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're watching from." He was just a single dad. No one saw him coming. Keep watching. Marcus Webb was 36 years old and had been working the dinner shift at the Carlington Grill for 2 years and 4 months. He knew this with the particular precision of a man who does not track time in years, but in accumulations. How many school pickups? How many lunches packed in the dark before 5 a.m.? How many times he had stood in the parking lot after close and done the careful arithmetic of the month? Rent. Nadia's school trip in April. The new winter coat she needed because the one from last year no longer covered her wrists. The specific calculation of whether there was room, this pay period, for the book she had asked about twice without directly asking a third time, because she had begun to understand, without being told, that asking for things at a cost her father felt even when he didn't show it. She was 8 years old. She had started understanding too many things. That morning, she had sat across from him at the kitchen table with her cereal going soft in the milk and her backpack half open at her feet, and she had said, without looking up from the library book she was reading, "Dad, do you think fish get lonely?" He had said he suspected some of them probably did. She had considered this seriously. "I think angelfish do. They're very social." She had finally looked up, and there was something in her face, not the fish question, something behind it, something she was considering whether to say. He had waited. She had closed the book carefully. "Are you okay today?" He had said he was fine. She had looked at him for a moment with her mother's eyes, the specific quality of attention that Sophie had given to things she didn't fully believe, and had said, "Okay," and returned to the angelfish. He had stood at the counter and drank his coffee and felt the specific shape of being seen by someone who had not yet decided what to do with what they saw. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment on Farrell Street. 3rd floor, walk up, the kind of building where the radiator had opinions and the windows required a particular technique to open properly in summer. Nadia had decorated her room with construction paper animals she taped carefully to the walls in arrangements that had their own internal logic, which she had explained to him once at length, and which he had listened to and not quite followed, but had found, in its totality, extraordinary. She had her mother's gift for making systems that looked like chaos from the outside and revealed themselves, on closer inspection, to be entirely governed by rules. Rules she had made herself and intended to keep. He had loved Sophie for 12 years. She had died when Nadia was 3. The illness had announced itself through her vision first, a narrowing at the edges, a loss of contrast, the particular cruelty of a condition that takes sight incrementally so that every new loss is measured against the thing you still have, not the thing you've already surrendered. She had not made a performance of it. Sophie had not been a person who made performances of difficulty. She had adapted, because adapting was the only alternative she found acceptable, and she had been furious about the things she couldn't adapt around. The driving, eventually, the reading of small print, the faces of strangers in poor light, and she had adapted around the fury too, with a speed that he found both admirable and occasionally alarming. He had learned Braille 18 months before she died. It had not been a dramatic decision. He had arrived gradually at the understanding that she could no longer read his handwriting, that the notes he left her on the pad by the bed, the small daily communications of two people living inside the same life, had become inaccessible. So he had ordered a beginner's guide and a slate and practice card, and he had sat at the kitchen table after Nadia was asleep and worked through the alphabet, then the contractions, then the number, rules, and punctuation, until what had first looked like a pattern of random raised dots resolved, slowly, into a language he could read with his fingertips. Sophie had wept the first time he left her a note she could read by touch. Not sentimentally. She was not a sentimental person. She had wept because she had gradually stopped expecting the world to come toward her, and then it had. He did not think about this in the way that people think about monuments. He thought about it the way he thought about breathing, as the thing underneath everything else, invisible until it wasn't. He had gotten a restaurant job through a contact from his previous work, front of house at a hotel 2 towns over, the kind of place where skill mattered but was rarely acknowledged. The Carlington Grill was smaller, the clientele consistent, the hours compatible with Nadia's school day. He had been good at it from the beginning, good in the quiet way. Tables that ran smoothly, complaints that dissolved before they became incidents, the particular gift of making people feel attended to without making them feel watched. Cora, who managed the floor, had noticed this within the first month and had assigned him accordingly, which meant the difficult tables, the uncertain guests, the situations that required someone who would not perform their competence, but simply exercise it. He did not have many friends among the staff. This was not loneliness. It was a preference for simplicity that had settled over him gradually over the past 5 years, and that he had decided to stop apologizing for. Jalen Briggs was 29 and worked the bar and had the specific confidence of a person who had always been told that his ease was charm and his carelessness was personality. He was not malicious in any calculated sense. He was the kind of person whose cruelty is entirely casual, the unkindness of someone who has never had to consider what their offhand moments cost someone else, because the someones in question have never been real to them. He had met a woman at a professional mixer the week before, visually impaired, well-dressed, clearly competent. He had taken her card with the reflex of someone who collects future utility without thinking about it. When someone, Marcus had not caught who, had made a comment about Marcus needing to stop being so solitary, Jalen had produced the card with the timing of a man who had been waiting for exactly this cue. The setup was not sophisticated. It was the kind of thing assembled by people who have mistaken discomfort for comedy. The assumption that placing a reserved, serious man in an awkward social situation with a visually impaired woman would be inherently embarrassing for both of them, and that the embarrassment would be entertaining. The joke worked in their imagining of it, only if Marcus was the kind of person who would flounder. What they had not modeled for was the specific nature of his quiet. Marcus had taken a reservation slip because a scene served no one. He had assigned himself to table 14 because a woman arriving alone at a restaurant where the menus were not in Braille deserve to have the table handled by someone who would not make the distance between what she needed and what the room offered feel like her problem to solve. He had not known, crossing the floor at 7:14, what Elena Voss was to the world outside that restaurant. He had known only what he could observe, that she was alone, that the menu was inaccessible to her, and that the quality of her stillness was the quality of a person who was very used to being in rooms that were not built for her and had developed, over time, an interior architecture strong enough to compensate. He brought her the first course. He placed it, described its arrangement on the plate, the position of each element, the way a clock face is used to orient food for someone who navigates differently, and told her that the kitchen had used a lighter hand with the acid than the menu described, which he thought was the right call tonight. She said, "You notice that kind of thing? It changes the dish," he said. It seemed worth mentioning. She had been quiet for a moment, the way she was quiet when she was actually thinking rather than simply pausing. "How long have you worked here?" "A little over 2 years. Before that?" "Hotel." Before that, he stopped, considered whether the full answer was appropriate, decided it wasn't his job to protect her from facts. "Before that, I was married and working in a different industry, and then I wasn't, and I needed hours that let me be home for pickup." She processed this without filling it with noise. "What does your daughter think of the restaurant?" "She thinks the risotto is worth the wait," he said. "She also thinks the bread basket should be bigger. She has strong opinions about bread." The corner of Elena's mouth moved again, the approach of something warmer this time. "How old is she?" 8. Going on 43. "She sounds extraordinary." "She's working on it," Marcus said. "She's very committed to the process." He collected the empty plate and straightened. He was aware, in his peripheral vision, of Jalen at the end of the bar, glass in hand, watching table 14 with the expression of a man whose punchline had not landed the way he'd anticipated. Not angry, just recalibrating, the way people do when the scene develops in a direction they hadn't scripted. Darius had moved to the service station and was studying the inventory sheet with more focus than it required. Marcus returned to the kitchen. Behind him, at table 14, Elena Voss's phone continued its silent, insistent vibration against the tablecloth. She had placed it face down when she sat. She had not touched it since. He came back with the main course. He placed it. He gave the clock face orientation again. The habit now, something his hands did before his mind caught up with it. "Marcus," she said. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment in a way that told him she was choosing whether to say the next thing. "The person who made this reservation. He didn't tell me you'd be my server specifically. He didn't know I'd request the table," Marcus said. "He set it up as something else." "I know what he set it up as," she said. Her voice was even. Not angry. Informed. "I've been in rooms longer than he's been alive. I know when I've been placed in one as a prop." He said nothing. He waited. "I stayed," she said, "because the first 2 minutes were different." A pause. "You read the menu like you were giving me actual information. Not like you were performing accommodation." "It's just a menu," he said. "You'd be surprised," she said, "how rarely it is." He looked at her for a moment. She was looking, orienting, in his direction, and in that orientation was something he recognized with the specific recognition of someone who has sat on both sides of a particular kind of loneliness. The loneliness of being in a room full of people who are all, in various ways, performing something in your direction rather than simply being present with you. "Your food will cool," he said quietly. Something moved across her face. Not the almost smile this time. Something more interior than that. "Yes," she said. "It will." He left her to eat. He was halfway to the service station when he heard it, the low, urgent buzz of her phone on the table, its vibration changing rhythm, the way phones do when a call follows a series of missed messages. He did not look back, but he noticed, when he came to clear the plates 20 minutes later, that the phone had been moved from face down to face up, and that its screen, which she couldn't see but could, he suspected, manage by tactile familiarity, showed 11 missed calls from a number labeled simply A. She had not returned any of them. He set the dessert menu aside. She had declined, and asked whether she'd like coffee. "Please," she said. He brought it. He placed it. He was preparing to move away when she said, without particular weight, "The woman you learn Braille for." She was lucky to have someone take that kind of trouble. It wasn't trouble, he said. It was just something that needed doing. She turned her face toward him. I know, she said. That's exactly what I mean. He walked back to the station. He picked up the tray. He did not look toward the bar, where Jalen had been watching. He did not need to look to know the expression he would find there. The room continued. The kitchen sent plates. Cora walked the floor with her quiet, calibrating attention. Nadia, at home, was asleep. He had texted the neighbor who sat with her on his evening shifts, and she had replied with a thumbs up and a note that Nadia had asked 3 follow-up questions about angelfish and had eventually been satisfied by the answer, probably yes. He stood at the service station and did the careful arithmetic of the evening. He thought about the woman at table 14 who had stayed when she had every reason not to, who had written something in Braille on a borrowed notepad, and who was receiving 11 missed calls from a contact she had labeled with only a single letter. He thought about the particular quality of her composure and the particular quality of what lay underneath it. Something had happened at that table tonight that he had not planned for and could not entirely account for. He was a person who paid attention to the things he couldn't account for. Sophie had taught him that. She had said, "You are always trying to solve things before you've finished understanding them. Stop. Just look at what's actually there." He looked at what was there. A woman who knew exactly what the evening had been arranged to be, and who had decided, for reasons of her own, to remain. A phone with 11 missed calls from someone who was looking for her urgently. A conversation that had moved, in the space of an hour, into territory that neither of them had navigated toward deliberately, and that both of them had entered anyway. The kitchen bell rang. He picked up the next order. At 8:47, Elena Voss folded her cane into its compact length, stood from table 14 with the easy precision of a woman who has made her own orientation system and trusts it, and moved toward the exit. At the door, she paused. She turned, not quite toward him. He was at the far side of the floor, but in the general direction of where she had last heard his voice. Then she walked through the door. On the table, beneath the edge of her water glass, she had left something, the notepad, folded once. He crossed the room and picked it up. He held it the way he held all pages in Braille, left hand anchoring, right hand reading. 5 words, written in careful, practice dots. Thank you for not performing. He stood beside table 14 for a moment. Around him the restaurant continued, the clearing of dishes, the folding of linen, Cora's quiet instruction to someone about the reservation log. Jalen said something at the bar. Marcus didn't hear what. He folded the notepad. He put it in his apron pocket. He went back to work. He did not expect to see her again. This was not pessimism. It was the honest arithmetic of the situation. A woman who had been placed at his table as someone else's punchline, who had stayed long enough to have a real conversation, who had left a note that said more than most people manage in an hour, and who had walked out into the night carrying 11 missed calls from someone who was looking for her with urgency. People in the center of something urgent do not typically return to a restaurant on Farrell Street to order coffee and talk to the waiter. He told Nadia about the evening in the edited way he told her most things, the facts without the weight. A woman came in alone. She wrote in Braille. He had read it. Nadia had looked up from her cereal. You read out loud? Yes. What did it say? She asked if the risotto was worth the wait. Nadia considered this with the gravity it deserved. Was it? I told her it ran long on Thursdays. That's honest, she said, with a nod that suggested honesty was a variable she had been tracking and was pleased to confirm. He had gone to work. He had done his shifts. The notepad stayed in his jacket pocket because he had not found the right moment to put it anywhere else, and eventually the right moment became beside the point. On the following Wednesday, Cora stopped him at the start of his shift and said there was a reservation at 7 for table 14. Party of 1. Name of Voss. He looked at the slip. He said nothing. He folded it and put it in his apron. She arrived at 7 exactly, which he was beginning to understand was simply how she operated. Time as a precision instrument, punctuality as a form of respect for the room she was entering. She wore a dark green coat over a gray dress, and she carried the cane folded rather than extended, which meant she had memorized the path from the door to the table either from last week or from some other visit he wasn't aware of. He was at the table before she had fully settled. Good evening, he said. Marcus, she said. Not a greeting exactly. More like a confirmation. Yes, the voice I expected, from the position I anticipated. You came back, he said. I did. A pause. Is that surprising? A little. She set the folded cane across her lap. I owe you an apology. He waited. The setup last week, she said. I knew what it was before I arrived. I have sources in this city that would surprise you. A small lift at the corner of her mouth. I stayed partly to see what you would do. That was not entirely fair to you. And what did I do? You read the menu, she said. You told me the salmon was better than the sea bass. You gave me the clock positions on the plate. She was quiet for a moment. You didn't perform anything. You mentioned that in your note. I meant it literally, she said. I've had a great deal of performance in my life. People performing patience, performing helpfulness, performing comfort with something that makes them uncomfortable. She touched the edge of the table, a small, orienting gesture, habitual. You were just doing your job. But the way you do your job it's particular. He pulled out his order pad. Can I tell you what's good tonight? She smiled. It was the first full smile he had seen from her. Not the approach of one, not the almost, but the thing itself, brief and unguarded and different from everything that had come before it. Please, she said. She came back the following Wednesday, and the one after that. Each time she arrived at 7. Each time she sat at table 14. Each time the conversation began in the practical register, the menu, the evening's dishes, the kitchen's decisions, and moved, gradually and without plan, in a territory that was not about food. She told him she worked in infrastructure investment. She said it carefully, the way people say things they know are abbreviations, and he registered the abbreviation without pressing on it. He told her about the hotel job before the restaurant, about the decision to take a lower-earning position for the hours, about Nadia's construction paper animals, and her ongoing inquiry into which species of fish were most susceptible to loneliness. Elena had laughed at that. A real laugh, not the polite kind. What's her conclusion so far? Angel fish, he said, though she's recently become concerned about manta rays. Manta rays are solitary. That's exactly the problem, according to Nadia. She had been quiet for a moment. She sounds like someone who pays attention to the things other people walk past. She does, he said. It's occasionally alarming. It sounds, Elena said carefully, like she learned it from somewhere. He said nothing, but he didn't disagree. On the 4th Wednesday, she was late. Not by much, 11 minutes, but the precision of the previous arrivals made the deviation notable. He had the table set, the water poured, and he was 3 steps from it when she came through the door. The cane was extended this time rather than folded. Her coat was the same dark green, but something in her posture had changed. Not the uprightness that remained, but the quality underneath it. A tightening. The specific tension of someone who has spent the day absorbing something and has not yet found a place to put it. He waited until she was seated before he approached. Traffic, she said before he spoke. It's a Wednesday, he said. The city doesn't respect Wednesdays. He almost smiled, but thinner. No, it doesn't. He brought water. He gave her a moment. He had learned that she did not require the comfortable silences to be filled. That, in fact, filling them was often the wrong decision. So he stood at a slight distance and waited until she indicated she was ready. She said, Can I ask you something that isn't about the menu? Yes. When your wife, she stopped, reorganized, when she was losing her sight. Before were there things you stopped doing? Things you assumed she couldn't participate in, so you just stopped including her in them? He considered the question honestly. Probably, he said, in the beginning, before I understood that the assumption was its own kind of exclusion. What changed your thinking? She told me, he said. She was very direct about that kind of thing. Elena was quiet, her hands flat on the table, pressed slightly downward, a gesture he had come to recognize as what she did when she was holding something in. Someone at my board meeting today, she said, presented a proposal to an empty chair. My chair, while I was sitting in it. They looked at the chair beside me when they spoke. The empty one. A pause. They were not being cruel. They simply had not sorted out where to direct their attention. Marcus said nothing. I've been doing this for 11 years, she said. Her voice was even. Completely even. The specific evenness of a voice that has decided not to give certain things the relief of volume. 11 years, and a man with a PowerPoint still can't decide where to look when he talks to me. He stayed where he was. He did not step toward her. He did not offer any of the things people offer in these moments. The reassurances, the comparisons, the reframings. He simply remained, present and still, in a way he had learned that Sophie sometimes needed someone to simply remain. After a moment, Elena said, "Thank you for not saying anything reassuring." "I didn't have anything reassuring to offer," he said. "Just the truth, which is that the man sounds like he should be embarrassed, and probably wasn't." The laugh that came from her was short and real and surprised. "No," she said. "He was not." He pulled out his order pad. "The duck is exceptional tonight. Is it better than the salmon was the first week?" "It's different," he said. "The salmon was better for what it was. The duck is better for what tonight is." She was quiet for a moment. "What is tonight?" "A Wednesday," he said, "in which certain things happen that should not have happened, and the person they happen to is choosing to have dinner anyway, which seems worth acknowledging with something excellent." Her hands, pressed flat on the table, released. "Duck," she said. It was Darius who came to him first. He found Marcus at the service station between courses, and he said it quietly, not conspiratorially, but with the directness of someone conveying information they believe the recipient is entitled to have. "Jalen's been talking," he said. Marcus waited. He looked her up. "After the first week." Darius kept his voice level. "Turns out your table 14 isn't just an infrastructure investor." "The Voss Group," he stopped. Checked Marcus's face. "You know the Voss Group?" Marcus knew of it the way most people knew of things they encountered in the edges of news. A holdings company, old money reoriented into modern development. The kind of organization whose name appeared at the bottom of announcements rather than at the top. He had not, until this moment, connected that name to the woman who asked about the risotto and came back every Wednesday at 7. "Jalen thinks it's funny," Darius said, "that you've been having quiet dinners with someone who—" He chose the next words carefully. "Someone who could buy this building." Marcus looked at the service station. He looked at the order in his hand. Is he planning to do anything with that information? Darius was quiet for a moment. "He's already told Cora." Framed it as concern. Said it looked like you were cultivating a relationship with a high-value guest for personal benefit. Marcus was still for 3 seconds. He understood what that framing was. He understood, too, what it was designed to produce. An intervention, a reassignment, a separation constructed to look like policy rather than what it actually was. "When did he tell Cora?" he asked. "This afternoon." Darius glanced toward the floor. "She hasn't said anything yet, but she will." Marcus picked up the tray. He thought about Nadia, asleep in the apartment on Farrell Street beneath a ceiling populated with construction paper animals organized according to principles he had never fully understood. He thought about the specific arithmetic of the month, the winter coat, the school trip, the book with the third unasked request folded inside it. He thought about a woman at table 14 who had told him, on the 4th Wednesday of their acquaintance, something true and difficult while her hands pressed flat against the tabletop. He picked up the tray. He crossed the floor. He brought Elena Voss her duck. He set it down. He gave her the clock positions. He described the preparation honestly and briefly. He was turning to go when she said his name. "Marcus." He stopped. She was quiet for a moment in the way she was quiet when something real was coming. "I know what's being said in this building," she said. Her voice was level, not the performed levelness from earlier in the evening. The natural kind. "About me. About why I keep coming back." He waited. "I want you to know," she said, "that I am aware of the difficulty it may be causing you. And I want you to know," a pause, brief and considered, "that if you decide it's easier for me to stop coming, I will understand that. Completely." He looked at her for a moment, at the precise orientation of her attention toward him, at the specific quality of what she was offering, an exit, wrapped in dignity, handed to him without flinching. He thought about Sophie telling him, "Stop trying to solve things before you've finished understanding them. Just look at what's actually there." He looked at what was there. "The duck will cool," he said quietly. Something passed across Elena Voss's face. Not the almost smile, not the real laugh. Something quieter than either, something that arrived in the space between controlled and unguarded and stayed there for a moment before she let it go. "Yes," she said. "It will." He walked back to the service station. Behind him, somewhere near the bar, Jalen Briggs was saying something to a cluster of servers. The easy posture, the waiting quality of a man presenting a punchline he was confident would land. Marcus set the tray down. He looked at the service log. He thought about tomorrow morning, Nadia and her cereal and her library book, the question about fish she would have saved overnight like something she didn't want to lose. He picked up the next order. He went back to work. Cora found him on a Thursday, not Wednesday, the day after Elena's 4th visit, the morning after Darius's warning. Cora managed the floor with the quiet precision of someone who had spent 20 years learning that most problems solve themselves if you gave them the correct amount of attention and not one drop more. She was not a dramatic person. She was not cruel. She was, however, the kind of person who, when a situation had been framed for her in a particular way by a particular voice, tended to act on the framing before she had finished examining it. She asked Marcus to come to the small office behind the kitchen at 11:15. He came. He sat in the chair across from her desk. He put his hands flat on his knees. She said, without preface, "I've had a concern raised about table 14. He said, "I know." She looked at him. She had known him for 2 years and 4 months. She knew the quality of his work and the precision of his timing and the specific gift he had for turning difficult tables into ordinary ones. She was, he thought, genuinely uncertain about what she was about to do, which was the only reason this conversation was happening in a chair rather than at the service station with a final check in an envelope. "The concern," she said carefully, "is that a pattern of attention toward a specific guest could create an appearance of cultivation," he said. She was quiet. "Jalen's word," he said, "not yours." A longer quiet. She looked at the desk. She looked at the folder in front of her, which he suspected contained very little, because the case against him was made entirely of implication and not of anything that could be written down and reviewed. "Marcus," she said, "I need to ask you directly. Is there anything about your relationship with this guest that would?" She lost her sight gradually, he said. "Over several years. She comes here because the menus are not in Braille, and I go through them with her in a way that gives her actual information rather than managed discomfort. She comes back because that's a thing she doesn't find easily, and it matters to her. That's all that's happening at table 14. Cora looked at him for a long moment. He held her gaze and said nothing further, because he had said the true thing, and the true thing was either enough or it wasn't, and performing anxiety on top of it would not change which. She closed the folder. She said, "I'll need you to keep the interactions within the standard of professional service." "They haven't been outside it," he said. "I know," she said. And then, more quietly, "I know." He stood. He thanked her. He went back to the floor. At the service station, Jalen was restocking the bar garnishes with the specific energy of someone who had been anticipating a different conclusion to the morning. He glanced at Marcus. He read what he saw. The return, the unchanged expression, the picking up of a tray without any alteration in pace. And something in his face recalibrated. He said nothing. Marcus picked up the next order. Elena came the following Wednesday at 7. She did not know about Cora's office. She did not know about the folder or the conversation or the specific quality of Thursday morning that Marcus had moved through and come out the other side of. She knew only what she could observe. The voice at the expected position, the water poured before she asked, the description of the evening's menu given in the register she had come to recognize as his. He told her the lamb was exceptional. He told her the kitchen had done something different with the herb preparation, and it was worth the deviation from her usual. She ordered the lamb. He brought it. He set it down. He was turning when she said, "Something is different tonight." He stopped. "In the kitchen?" "In you." He was quiet for a moment. He thought about Sophie, who had said, "I can hear a decision you've made before you know you've made it." Your voice changes. "Someone raised a concern," he said, "about our dinners." It was addressed. She was still. "What kind of concern?" "The kind that is made by people who need a situation to mean something other than what it is." He heard her set down the fork. "Marcus." "It's handled," he said. "It's not handled if you're standing here, carrying it." Her voice was even but not neutral. There was an edge in it. Not anger, but something close to the place anger comes from. Who raised it? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. He considered that. He sat down, not across from her, beside the table, which was not standard and was also the only honest thing to do in this moment. There's a person on staff who finds the situation incongruous, he said carefully. A single father who waits tables having dinner conversations with someone from a different category of the world. He found ways to describe it that sounded like a policy concern. She was quiet for a very long time. The restaurant moved around them. The clearing of a nearby table, the low instruction of a server to a busboy, the kitchen bell. Then she said, "How long have you worked here?" 2 years and 4 months. And before that, the hotel. Yes. And before Nadia was born, what did you do? He had mentioned in one of their earlier conversations that he had changed industries. He had not specified the direction of the change. He answered now the way he answered most things, plainly, without cushioning. I ran operations for a regional logistics firm. Before that, I had a degree in systems engineering that I used for about 6 years before I decided proximity to Nadia mattered more than the application of the degree. Elena was still. You ran operations, she said. Regional director, eventually. 12 people. Decent-sized territory. And you left. Sophie got sick, he said. And then she died. And then it was just Nadia and me, and the hours of that job were incompatible with being the only person she had. The fork remained untouched beside the plate. You didn't mention any of that, she said. In 4 Wednesdays. It didn't come up. It didn't, she stopped. When she spoke again, her voice had a different quality, not the composed register, but something underneath it, something that had been waiting for enough material to arrive before it could surface. Marcus, the person who raised the concern about these dinners. Yes, his name. He was quiet. I'm not asking so that I can do something dramatic, she said. I'm asking because I believe you are a person of significant and completely unrecognized capability, working in a position several categories below what you built, and someone in that position used that gap against you. And I would like to know who. He looked at her, at the precise orientation of her attention, which had never once, in 5 Wednesdays, felt like anything other than the most direct form of being seen he had encountered in a very long time. He said, his name is Jalen. He did not know what followed, exactly, because he was not in the room where it happened. What he knew was this. On the Thursday after the 5th Wednesday, Cora asked him to come to the office again. The folder on the desk was different, thicker. Her expression was different too. Not uncertain this time, but carrying the specific quality of someone who has received information that has reorganized their understanding of a situation. She said, I owe you an apology. He said, you were working with what you'd been given. I should have asked more questions before I called you in. She looked at the desk. I'm going to be asking Jalen to come in later this morning. That conversation will be different. He said nothing. Marcus. She looked up. The Voss Group. Do you know what they do? Specifically, infrastructure investment, he said. She mentioned it early on. They have a hospitality division, Cora said. They've been looking at properties in this corridor for about 8 months. A pause, carefully placed. They made contact with the restaurant's ownership group 2 days ago to discuss a potential consulting partnership, the kind that would come with operational restructuring, better hours for staff, a general manager position created from within the current team. He looked at her. She looked at him. The contact specified, she said, that the restructuring recommendation included elevating a current floor staff member with a background in operations. The recommendation was specific about the background required. She was quiet for a moment. It matched yours exactly. He was still. I want to be clear, Cora said. I'm not telling you this to make you feel beholden to anyone. I'm telling you because you should understand what has been offered and why, and you should have the information to make your own decision about it. He thought about Nadia and her cereal. He thought about the winter coat and the book with the third unasked question inside it. He thought about the arithmetic of the month, how he had run it so many times that the numbers had become a kind of background music, always present, always slightly too loud. He thought about a woman at table 14 who had told him, plainly and without performance, that she was not good at showing up to places she wanted to be, and who had shown up anyway. What does the position involve? He asked. Cora told him. He listened the way he listened to things that mattered, completely, without assembling his response until the information was finished arriving. Then he said, I'd like to think about it. Take the time you need, she said. He walked back out to the floor. At the bar, Jalen was not restocking garnishes. Jalen was sitting in the office at the end of his own conversation, which Marcus had not been asked to observe and did not require him to. The reckoning, when it came for people like Jalen, was never theatrical. It was quiet and administrative and permanent in the way that quiet things are permanent, without offering the relief of drama. Marcus picked up the tray. He went back to work. He told Nadia that evening. Not all of it. The shape of it. He said that something at work had changed and that it might mean different hours and a different kind of responsibility, and he wanted to know what she thought. She put down the library book. She looked at him with her mother's specific quality of attention. Will we still have breakfast? She asked. Every morning, he said. She considered this seriously. Would you still pick me up from school? The hours would actually make that easier, he said. She looked at the table for a moment. Then she looked up. Dad, is this because of the woman who writes in Braille? He was quiet. Darius called, she said. He talked to Mrs. Patterson next door. Mrs. Patterson told me. She paused. He said she was important. She is, Marcus said. Is she your friend? He thought about 5 Wednesdays. He thought about a notepad with 5 words pressed into it in careful dots. He thought about a woman who had offered him an exit, wrapped in dignity, and had not tried to take the decision out of his hands. I think so, he said. Yes. Nadia nodded slowly. I think manta rays are lonely, she said, because nobody thinks to check on them. She picked up the book. But if someone does check, they're probably not lonely anymore. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. 8 years old, going on 43. Go to sleep soon, he said. I know, she said. One more chapter. The following Wednesday, Elena arrived at 7. He was at the table before she had settled. He had the water poured. He had the evening's menu arranged in his mind. He said, Good evening. She said, Marcus. The confirmation, the orientation, the thing she did that told him she had placed him precisely in the room. Then she said, I owe you a conversation. You don't owe me anything, he said. I made a unilateral decision that affected your professional situation without consulting you, she said. That is something I've been told by the one person in my life who is honest enough to tell me these things, that I do. I reach for the lever that fixes the problem without checking whether the person near the problem wants it fixed that way. He sat beside the table in a non-standard position that had become, over 5 Wednesdays, simply the honest one. Cora told me, he said, about the position. I know she did. A pause. I asked her to frame it as a professional opportunity rather than a gesture. I didn't want it to feel like charity, he said. Yes. He thought about a printed sheet set on a conference table. We're not doing him a favor. We're acknowledging what he's already been doing. He looked at Elena Voss. At the quality of her stillness, which he had come to understand was not containment, but simply the way she occupied space. Fully, without excess, with the settled confidence of a person who had built her own interior architecture and trusted it. The position is real, he asked. Not created for me. We've needed it for 8 months, she said. I found the person for it 6 weeks ago. It took me until now to handle the execution correctly. A pause. The execution, in retrospect, was imperfect. It was imperfect, he agreed, and I'm still considering it. Something moved across her face. Not the almost smile. Not the real laugh. The other thing, the interior one, the one that arrived in the space between controlled and unguarded and stayed there. That's fair, she said. I have one question, he said. Yes. Table 14, he said. If I take the position, are the Wednesday dinners non-negotiable, she said, without waiting for him to finish. As long as the risotto is worth the wait. He looked at her for a moment. On Thursdays, he said, it runs long. Then we'll come on Wednesdays, she said. He thought about Nadia, who had said, if someone does check, they're probably not lonely anymore. He thought about Sophie, who had said, just look at what's actually there. He looked at what was there. I'll take the position, he said. The room continued its Wednesday evening hum around them. The kitchen sent its signals. The floor moved through its rhythms. Somewhere near the bar, The space where Jalen had stood was occupied by someone else now, a new hire, competent, still learning the room. Elena Voss picked up the fork she had set down an hour ago. She said, "Tell me what's good tonight." And he told her. 3 months later, Nadia asked if she could meet the woman who wrote in Braille. He said he would ask. Elena said yes immediately. He heard it in her voice, not the considered pause before a decision, but the thing that arrived before the decision, which was the answer itself. They met on a Saturday at a cafe near the river. Nadia in her red winter coat, new, finally, with cuffs that reach her wrists, carrying the library book she was currently working through. Elena with her cane extended, a gray scarf, the settled posture he had come to know as simply hers. Nadia sat across from her and said, "My dad says you know about economics." Elena said some. "I've been reading about supply chains," Nadia said. "Because of the manta rays." A pause. "The manta rays," Elena said. "They live in very specific places," Nadia said. "And if something changes in the supply, like the plankton or the currents, everything reorganizes. I was thinking that's like supply chains. Things are connected in ways that aren't obvious until they break." Elena was still for a moment. The kind of stillness Marcus recognized. Information arriving, being filed, being placed in relation to other information already held. "That is exactly like supply chains," she said. "That is, in fact, one of the better explanations I've heard." Nadia looked satisfied. She opened the book. Then she looked up again. "Are you going to keep having dinner with my dad?" "Yes," Elena said. "Good," Nadia said. "He does his face now. The one that means things are actually good." She returned to the book. "He didn't used to." Marcus looked at Elena. Elena turned her face toward him. The precise orientation, the attention directed without sight, the thing that had felt from the very first evening, like the most direct form of being seen. Neither of them said anything. Outside, the river moved. The cafe held its Saturday warmth. Nadia read about manta rays and supply chains, and the invisible systems that connect things across distances too large to see from any single point. And somewhere in the building's infrastructure, in the walls and the systems and the things that keep a room at the right temperature for the people inside it, everything was for the moment, working. Thank you for sitting with this story all the way to the end. The people who stay for the whole story are the ones who understand it. If it moved you, the videos on your screen right now are waiting to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, come home. Quiet Kind has a story for you.